What's the first thing you do when you hear about a natural disaster or an emergency situation? You stock up on food, water, and essentials, right? But if you're a person of faith, you may be wrestling with some questions. Is prepping showing a lack of faith in God? Or is it a practical way of taking care of the loved ones God has entrusted to you? Today, we're diving into a controversial subject: faith-based emergency preparedness. It's not just about canned goods and batteries. It's about finding that intricate balance between leaning on God's providence and being practically prepared for the worst. We'll dig deep into biblical stories like Joseph's wisdom during the famine in Egypt and discuss real-world applications of faith-based emergency preparedness. Buckle up, because we're about to shake up some of your deeply held beliefs. The paradox of faith and self-reliance. It's a disconcerting question that we all face. Does preparing for disaster somehow indicate a lack of faith in divine protection?
Why you always gotta be so mean to me?
You find yourself at this spiritual precipice, asking whether the construction of your own safety net serves as a profound demonstration of wisdom or a faithless surrender to fear. This isn't a simple debate. It's an existential inquiry into the very core of belief and human responsibility. I recall a moment of looming disaster in my community. Meteorologists warned of a severe storm, and even my pastor spoke of it from the pulpit. In the grocery store, before shelves lined with emergency supplies, I confronted a crisis of faith. Should I take action by hoarding food and water, or should I interpret this very act as a testament to my lack of faith? The struggle within me was palpable, a true challenge to my principles. To argue that faith and self-reliance are mutually exclusive misses the nuanced complexity of real life. This isn't about choosing between a spiritual existence and a practical one. It's about the artful merging of the two. It's an intricate dance that demands finesse. The key lies in locating the balanced intersection where a well-placed faith in higher powers complements the value of responsible action. The biblical case for emergency preparedness. Remember Joseph from the Bible? He was more than just a dreamer clad in a multicolored coat. Joseph was arguably the first emergency preparedness expert. For 7 years, he stored grain in anticipation of a 7-year famine. Joseph's example presents a case for the possible unity of deep-rooted faith and rational action. So, if Joseph could prepare for adversity while maintaining an unwavering trust in divine direction, what excuse do we have for failing to find this balance? Joseph wasn't some ancient conspiracy theorist. He was a visionary who exercised spiritual discernment along with practical wisdom. As his story reveals, faith shouldn't nullify our sense of earthly responsibility. Rather, it should empower us to manage our resources more wisely. By taking a lesson from Joseph's life, we learn that it's not only possible, but also advisable, to balance spiritual reliance on divine guidance with real-world preparedness. How to integrate faith into preparedness plan. Imagine you're standing at a fork in a heavily wooded path, each direction as foreboding as the other. Uncertain of which way to go, you pause to pray for guidance. It's the same crossroads we face when an impending crisis looms over us. Should we prepare, filling our basements with non-perishable items, or does that undermine our faith? The answer is not to choose one path over the other. It's about harmonizing both into a well-guided journey. Your prayers can serve as your internal compass. They may not dictate whether you should pick canned beans over dried pasta, but they can infuse you with the wisdom to navigate difficult decisions. It's like hearing a soft whisper that says,
"It's okay to prepare. You're not demonstrating a lack of faith, but rather acting as a good steward of your family's well-being."
Picture Noah, in an era before weather forecasts and flood alerts. Can you see him there, hammer and nail in hand, constructing an ark under a still, clear sky? The ridicule he faced from his community was harsh. Why prepare for a flood in drought? They jeered. Yet Noah continued to build, driven by divine guidance and a sense of responsibility. When the skies finally opened, Noah's readiness proved to be an act of obedience, not a lack of faith. Like Noah, you might find yourself in the minority, a lone figure in a world that misunderstands the sanctity of being prepared. Or think of the early Christian community in the book of Acts. They lived in communal harmony, sharing resources and ensuring that no one was in need. It wasn't just about storing up for the winter or pooling resources. It was about a faith that propelled them into action, into a real-world preparedness that went hand in hand with their spiritual commitments. The Bible is replete with such stories, tales that, upon closer look, tell us that faith and preparedness are not just reconcilable, but are, in fact, symbiotic. It's a cyclical relationship. Your faith guides your actions, and your actions, if righteous, reinforce your faith. So, when the sirens of a turbulent world wail around you, don't get ensnared in the false dichotomy between faith and preparedness. Instead, stand in the gap, fortifying your spiritual house while also physically preparing for life's storms. As you do, you'll find that the two paths you thought were divergent are actually parallel lanes on the same road toward divine purpose and earthly well-being. The nuanced role of divine provision. Many people point to reassuring verses in Matthew, Philippians, and Psalms as evidence that we should rely solely on divine provision, interpreting them to suggest that earthly preparedness is unnecessary. However, it's crucial to take a more nuanced view. These scriptures aren't a green light for neglecting our personal or communal duties. Even the Bible's depictions of birds who are said to be provided for by God show them actively gathering their food. So, instead of viewing these scriptures as a reason to eschew all forms of earthly preparation, think of them as advocating for a balanced approach. Trust in divine provision should work hand in hand with practical steps we can take to ensure our safety and well-being. After all, faith and action are two sides of the same spiritual coin. A rational take on self-reliance scriptures like Proverbs 21:20 and 1 Timothy 5:8 advocate for a thoughtful approach to providing for oneself and one's family. In fact, the book of Proverbs even lauds the ant for its forward-thinking food storage. Let's be clear, self-reliance is not an indictment of your faith. If anything, it's a logical extension of it. By preparing for unforeseen events, you're not showcasing a distrust in higher powers, but are actually embodying the principles of stewardship and responsibility. Another compelling example can be found in the parable of the Good Samaritan, which portrays preparedness as an effective tool for loving thy neighbor. The parable teaches us that the Good Samaritan was effective in his compassion partly because he was prepared. His readiness enabled him to fulfill the greater command of loving one's neighbor as oneself. Now imagine a society where each individual is both spiritually aligned and prepared for emergencies. Such a community would not just survive crises, but thrive through them, rooted in faith while reaching out in pragmatic support to one another. Adding practical preparedness to your life can be seen as an extension of your faith, a concrete way to live out the principles that guide you. It's like putting faith into action. By mastering essential life skills, you're acknowledging the complexity of life's challenges and embracing your God-given ability to respond to them. In essence, you're aligning yourself with a biblical approach that appreciates both divine guidance and human initiative. So, instead of viewing preparedness as a form of doubt or disbelief,
I don't believe this. I don't believe you.
see it as a faithful complement to your spiritual trust, making you a more complete and effective steward in the world.